Well, hello once again, and welcome back to your favourite classic dirt bike TV channel, where we take a look at some of the old vintage race machines from our past and talk a little about them, and sometimes talk about some of the riders that rode these fantastic machines back in the day. Now, just in case you haven't already subscribed to my channel, if you like my content here on Classic Dirt Bike TV, then I do hope you will consider signing up to subscribe to my channel. Of course, that way you won't miss out on any future videos that I post coming up in the weeks and months ahead. So our next video posting is we're going to take a look at a bike that I spotted during my paddock travels during 2021, and this time round we're going to take a look at this lovely 1979 KX 250 Kawasaki. Now, this featured KX 250 A5 is a bike that I came across at the Westmoreland Golden Jubilee Scramble in 2021, and the bike belongs to James Neil Jones, who was soon to be racing it at that event. Now, the bike, of course, isn't an original 1979 KX250, as it has a few non-original parts fitted onto it, but nevertheless it's a cracking example of one of these superb Kawasaki racers. Now, back in 1979, these twin-shock KXs were excellent little race bikes because they did have quite good suspension on the front and rear, and they handled quite well, and of course they also had that stonking 250 reed valve two-stroke motor. Although surprisingly, when you attend vintage or classic motocross events in this modern day, you'll be quite hard pressed to find or even catch a glimpse of one of these 79 bikes on the track, because it seems that very few of these old KXs nowadays are still being used as everyday race bikes, which is a bit of a shame really, because they were good at what they did. Now, once again, the engines on these 79 250s were among some of the best power plants for a late 1970s motocrosser, because they had a decent spread of usable power, and as I remember, I think they put out about 40 horsepower. Now, the KX250 had a 5-speed gearbox and a standard wet multi-plate clutch. Now, James's motor here is of course not a fully stock example, as the original ignition cover has been replaced by this Cerakote ceramic coating that's been added. Now, this kind of Cerakote upgrade is now quite a popular addition on these old crossers, and I've seen owners coating side casings and other parts of their machines' engines in this new covering, but it's said to be very hard wearing and can stand extremely high temperatures. But overall, these 252 stroke KX engines were reasonably reliable and had as standard, I think it was a 38mm Mikuni carburetor to feed the motor with its fuel through a V-Force 3 reed valve block. Now, I actually had a friend who raced one of these KX250s way back in the day, and he always thought that this little bike was a fantastic racer, and he spoke very highly of the bike's handling and its powerful two-stroke engine. Now, once again, the oil-cooled wet clutches on the 79 250s, as I've been told, were quite light in their operation and very rugged, and these clutches could take quite a lot of punishment from even the biggest of ham-fisted riders. Now, as I remember, I'm pretty sure that these motors would have been fitted with a Japanese Mikuni carburetor back in 1979, although it looks like James has swapped his for this American-made Electron flat slide unit I think these were actually called the Fuel View carburetors. Now these Electron carbs are very good quality, and as you can see, this particular model has a translucent float bowl where you can visually see how much fuel is actually in the carb. And of course the other plus point is that you can see if there's any debris or dirt particles floating around that need to be cleaned out. Now once again, at the bike's front end, I'm pretty sure that these 250s had a set of 38mm Kayaba forks originally, and James's KX does look like it has the proper forks fitted for that period. But again, for a 1970s twin shock racer, these suspension units were very good, and by all accounts worked well on this 250 Kawasaki. And as you'd expect, the KXs of 1979 were still using old school drum brakes on the front and rear. And again, if my aging memory serves me correctly, these hubs were cast in magnesium that year. Now, at the Kawasaki's rear end in 1979, a pair of Kayaba twin shocks would have been fitted onto the back of this bike, although as this Kawasaki is now heading for 42 years old, it's not surprising that James has now swapped the tired originals for a pair of these high quality British made YSS piggyback units. Now again, these are top quality, and they're quite a straightforward bolt-on replacement for the original parts from 79, and they're all fully tunable with regards rebound and damping, and of course can also be designed and built to a specific rider's weight. Now when you're out and about and wandering around the old vintage race paddocks, these 250s are usually quite easily recognisable when you see these gold anodised alloy rear swing arms, and there's certainly something about that combination of the Kawasaki green and the bike's gold coloured swing arm and wheels, which all just seem to blend perfectly together. Now I'm sure that James has been out with the old spray gun recently, and he's been tidying up this particular swing arm and some of the other bits and pieces on the bike, as this part certainly looks almost better than it did way back in 1979. But again, old school drum brakes on the rear with these older drum systems, and as in the front hub, more magnesium is used in this rear hub's construction. Now once more, a plastic polyethylene fuel tank for that year, and quite a substantial size for just a 250, but these fuel cells would have held, I think it was around 2.5 gallons of fuel, which was more than enough storage space to keep that 250 reed valve motor fed with its fuel. Now of course, on a 42-year-old vintage racer, you can't expect it to still have all of its factory fitted parts still intact, and the KX's original exhaust expansion chamber here has been replaced by this high quality PFR item, or Pro Form Racing, if you want to give it its full title. Now it also has a replacement PFR alloy tailpipe at the back as well, and again these are all top quality parts and a very big improvement over the 1979 stock items. Now James's KX again, as you're no doubt aware, has a pair of replacement wheels on his bike, and these XL Tagasago gold anodized alloy rims are top quality, and these have been fully rebuilt with brand new spokes onto the magnesium brake hubs. Now again, I've heard them say that the seats on these 79 bikes were among the comfiest in its class in that particular year, and with the limited amount of travel that you had on these old Twinshockers in the 1970s, every extra millimetre that you could gain on the seat always helped towards soaking up the jumps and bumps on the racetrack. But back in 1979, these Quacker 250s did get some decent reviews from the Offroad magazine press of their time, because this was a completely brand new design of bike from the previous KX model the year before. Now, testers on the day heaped praise on the KX 250's two-stroke engine, which they said was very powerful and willing, and had a good spread of usable power in the mid-range where it performed at its best. Now, the bike's chassis was again very good, and the front and rear suspension was excellent, although you have to remember that this was still a late 1970s motocrosser. But for me personally, it's quite hard to understand why, if these old KX 250s were such a good all-round package as a race bike, how come that you never see many of them at vintage or classic race events nowadays? But whether that's because there's not too many of them left around these days, or because maybe spare parts are a problem, I don't really know. But nonetheless, it's still great to take a look at one in the flesh once again, even although it's not a full-blown stock bike from that fantastic 1970s era. Well, there you have it, another nice old classic from back in the day, a 1979 KX 250 Kawasaki. Not, of course, a fully original bike from that period, but nonetheless a nice old twin-shock racer. Okay, if you haven't already subscribed to my channel and you do like my video content, then I do hope you will consider subscribing to my channel in the future. Of course, that way you won't miss out on any future video postings that I put up here on my channel. But coming up next here on my YouTube channel will be this 250 Can-Am racer. Now, this was a bike that used to belong to the late Ian Robertson, but this bike is now owned and raced by Scottish rider Billy Pentland. So we'll take a look at this nice 250 Can-Am in my next video posting here on my channel. But until then, of course, everybody watch out what you're doing out there with those old vintage racers, and stay safe and well until we all return once more to your #1 vintage dirt bike channel, Classic Dirt Bike TV.